'cause you live in the town. There's no need to be unhappy. Young man, there's a place you can go. I said, young man, when you're short on your dough, you can't stay there. And I'm sure you will find many ways to have a good time. Come on, everybody. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. Fun to stay at the YMCA.
Kind of hard not to boogie when you hear the YMCA song. And I'm going to be frank, I didn't love it until its current constancy and the dances that I've seen going along with it. Tens of thousands of people attended President-elect Trump's fire rally on Sunday at the Capital One Arena. Trump promised to take back the United States as Americans begin the journey to the first day of a brand new country.
We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America's promise and we will rebuild the nation that we all love so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will never give in. We will never give up. We will never back down, and we will never, ever, ever, ever surrender. We will fight, 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 and we will win, win, win.
Joining me now to discuss is politics editor for the Daily Signal, Bradley Devlin. Bradley, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you're on the ground in DC. I'm just turning it over to you. What have you seen? What is it like there today?
Well, the mood is pretty joyful about the festivities, but a lot of people are feeling left out, whether that's at Capital One Arena or around the Capitol. People are doing everything that they can to capture a glimpse of their new president. And I think President Trump, as we've seen, is going out of his way to try to see as many people as possible. He was inaugurated inside the rotunda and shortly thereafter went over to the visitor center where other folks were seated, such as Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and said hello and went on a long, lengthy inauguration day ramble, the likes that only Trump can put together. And so he's going to be doing that, I think, throughout the day, throughout the week, as he acts vigorously on this agenda that the American people provided him a mandate with.
You know, I got to tell you, Bradley, I've seen some posts from friends who ventured to Washington, D.C., and because the actual inauguration was moved indoors to the rotunda, much smaller group of people who could actually attend. And so they had tickets and they were color coded and they thought they were going to be close enough to see the president. And instead, because they didn't show up at 4:30 this morning, they actually weren't able to attend at all. They had to watch from their hotel rooms. And so people were posting about that. And I know it's disappointing, but there was just so much going on. And I felt as if there was an underlying security concern that they didn't want to play up and remove the joyousness from the day. But there was that, there was the weather, there was just so many different things at play here.
Yeah, a ton of things at play here. I have not heard of any security concern. Our building right now, the studio that I'm at, is going to be within the perimeter for the Union Station event tonight. We have not been notified, at least that I'm aware of. So if someone is watching this on staff, please let me know if there's a security threat. But we haven't heard anything of that nature. I do think it was just, this is what happens at Trump rallies and Trump events. He draws massive crowds. I was on the ground on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, when the president was nearly assassinated, and there were tens of thousands of people. I mean, the Trump campaign has to spend thousands of dollars on just water bottles when they host a rally. And so now you scale that up to the size of the inauguration with a lot of elderly folks outside in the cold, not just for the short proceedings, but the grounds open at 6 a.m. and then you have the parade. I mean, this is a very long day. And I think seeing just how cold it was going to be, the president did not want to stress test law enforcement or emergency services any more than the week's proceedings require. And so I think people will look back on this event and accept reluctantly that it was the best course of action. But I think in President Trump's speech, 8 years ago, he only used the first person twice in his inauguration speech. He said, "I take this oath for all Americans, and I will fight for you with every breath in my body." 8 years later, that latter sentiment takes on whole new meaning. But today, in the Capitol Rotunda, relying a lot more on the first person, I think, was an interesting choice to try to drive that connection between Trump and his base and the people who gave him this mandate, even though they couldn't all be together on the National Mall.
Bradley, I love that that comparison between the two speeches, and I have to say, I felt like it was very personal. I felt there was a connection even when he entered the space. He was the last one to enter, and everyone stood for him, and they were applauding. There was just a kind of electric nature to it that I felt through the television as I was watching, as opposed to being there. And I've been to Trump rallies before. He is an amazing speaker. I've waited on my feet for 6 hours before. I walked 4 miles in Colombia to an airport hangar because I arrived as media 3 hours before the event, and every bit of available parking was already taken. And I ended up parking on a frontage road near a farm and hiking all the way in. So I can tell you these crowds and the water bottles, everything you described is absolutely true. I totally co-sign. But I think that's an indication of just how exciting he is when it comes to policy and how much people identify with who he is. So talk to me about the things that we know about the executive orders and what you're expecting tomorrow, because we're already in it.
Yeah, vigorous action from the president, especially on energy and immigration issues. Of course, these are going to be big issues throughout the first year of the Trump administration as they go forward with budget reconciliation in Congress. But President Trump's going to do what the president can do to solve these problems right now, right? Put a suspension on refugee resettlement, make sure that he closes the border by surging, whether it's troops or actually just cutting off or cutting down the process of illegal migrants or migrants in general entering the country, reinstating remain in Mexico policies. These are all things that President Trump is going to do. Now, when you see these executive orders come out, you're going to say, wait, President Trump is sending troops to the border? How many troops is he sending to the border? Well, that is something that is going to be delegated to the secretaries and to the different agencies. And that is something that I think in due course we'll figure out, but it's not going to have every single little detail fleshed out, right? The nature of an executive order is that the president executing federal law passed by Congress is now directing and delegating his authorities to the relevant parties. So I think you're going to see a lot of, semi-vague language, and you're going to see potentially some court challenges. We've already seen a lawsuit come in by progressive groups against DOGE, the effort by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to cut government waste. And you'll see some of that as well. But that's why also the president kind of leaves things ambiguous, because there's ways to pivot to make sure that he's answering the call that Americans gave him in November to change the trajectory of this country and to change it quickly. One more thing on the executive orders. We're expecting about 100. That's 5 times more than Joe Biden's signed in his first week in office. He only signed 9 on day 1. So this is incredibly aggressive action, more aggressive than I think anyone anticipated when he won in November, and something that I think the Congress is going to accept because it's this flurry of action. But in moving forward, they want to say, hey, let's make these changes permanent by making sure that they get into law.
I love that. And that's what we're looking for. I think that's a big part of what Americans were voting for. No more of this flip flopping on executive actions that for things that are very important. Oh, so good. Bradley Devlin, politics editor over at Heritage. Thank you. Daily Signal. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much.
All right, good to see you. And I have it on personal authority from the Trump campaign this morning on a call that I attended that is exactly what is going on here. The president is issuing these orders because that's his mandate and that's the promise he made. We'll be right back with more The Transition of Powers in the books right here on Salem News Channel.